Look at a satellite image of Brazil at night. The coasts glow like fire. São Paulo, Rio, Salvador cities stacked against the Atlantic like they're afraid to leave. But turn your eyes inland, toward the center, and something strange happens. The lights vanish. For thousands of kilometers, there's almost nothing. This is the fifth largest country on Earth, and its heart is practically empty. How can a nation with 215 million people leave an area the size of Western Europe nearly untouched? This isn't about lack of resources. The Brazilian interior, a region called the Cerrado, and the beginnings of the Amazon, hold some of the richest ecosystems on the planet. It has water, it has land, it could support tens of millions. Yet fewer than 15 million people live scattered across this vast heartland. Meanwhile, 90% of Brazilians cling to a narrow strip along the coast. The contrast is shocking. It's as if the country turned its back on itself, but this emptiness isn't random. It's the result of geography, history, and decisions made centuries ago that still shape Brazil today. The Portuguese arrived in 1500 and built their empire facing the ocean, not the jungle. Every major city, every plantation, every fort was constructed within sight of the Atlantic. The interior? It was a mystery. A green wall that seemed endless and hostile. Even today, 5 centuries later, that pattern holds. Brazil grew outward into the world, but never inward into itself. In the next 15 minutes, we'll journey into Brazil's hollow core and uncover why its center remains one of the most underpopulated regions in the developing world. We'll explore the geography that made settlement nearly impossible, the history that locked people to the coast, and the modern forces keeping Brazil's heart empty. To understand why Brazil's heart is empty, you first need to understand what's actually there. The interior isn't a uniform wilderness. It's divided into distinct ecological zones, each with its own character and challenges. The largest is the Cerrado, a vast tropical savanna covering over 2 million square kilometers. That's roughly the size of Mexico. Picture endless grasslands dotted with twisted, gnarled trees with thick bark. The Cerrado isn't the lush paradise you might imagine. The soil is ancient, acidic, and nutrient-poor, leached by millions of years of rainfall. It's hard to farm without modern fertilizers. The region experiences extreme seasons, 6 months of drought where temperatures soar above 35 degrees Celsius, followed by torrential rains that flood the land. North of the Cerrado lies the Amazon basin, the planet's largest rainforest. Hot, humid, and impenetrable in many areas, the Amazon seems alive with biodiversity, but is surprisingly poor for agriculture. The soil beneath the canopy is thin and exhausted. Indigenous peoples learned to work with it, but European farming methods failed catastrophically. Further south, you find the Pantanal, the world's largest tropical wetland. During the wet season, it becomes an inland sea, submerging roads and isolating communities for months. It's breathtaking but utterly impractical for large-scale settlement. These aren't gentle landscapes. They're extreme environments that demand adaptation, not domination. For the Portuguese colonizers arriving from temperate Europe, this interior was alien and terrifying. The coast offered everything they needed: harbors, predictable weather, and soil that could grow sugarcane. So they stayed there. And for centuries, that decision defined Brazil's geography. When the Portuguese landed in 1500, they weren't looking to explore. They were looking to extract. Brazil was never meant to be a nation, it was a resource. And the most valuable resource sat right on the coast: sugarcane. The northeastern coast had everything needed for sugar production: rich Masapa soil, warm temperatures, abundant rainfall, and most importantly, proximity to the Atlantic. Sugar was Europe's white gold, and Brazil's coast became a plantation empire. Ships arrived with enslaved Africans, loaded sugar, and sailed back to Lisbon. The entire economy faced outward, toward Europe, not inward toward the mysterious interior. There was no reason to go inland. The indigenous populations told stories of endless forests, hostile tribes, and death from disease. The few Bandeirantes explorers who ventured into the interior returned with tales of gold and emeralds, but also of starvation, malaria, and indigenous attacks. Most never returned at all. So the coastal pattern solidified. Salvador became the first capital in 1549, built on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Rio de Janeiro rose as a port city in 1565. Later, cities like Recife, Fortaleza, and Belém joined the chain. Every major settlement faced the ocean. The interior remained blank on maps, marked only with drawings of monsters and speculation. By the 1700s, gold was discovered in Minas Gerais, and finally, people pushed inland. But even this movement was limited. Minas Gerais sits relatively close to the coast, just a few hundred kilometers from Rio. The true interior, the deep Cerrado and Amazon, remained untouched. The colonial economy didn't need it. And when Brazil became independent in 1822, it inherited this coastal-focused geography. The infrastructure, the culture, the entire national identity was Atlantic-facing. Geography wasn't just about soil and climate, it was about movement. And in Brazil's interior, movement was nearly impossible. Look at Brazil's river system. At first glance, it seems perfect for settlement. The Amazon, the Tocantins, the Araguaia, the Paraguay, these are some of the largest rivers on Earth. But here's the problem. They flow in the wrong direction. Most of Brazil's major rivers flow north toward the Amazon or south toward the Rio de la Plata. Almost none flow east toward the Atlantic coast where the cities are. This might seem like a minor detail, but it's everything. Rivers were the highways of the colonial world. In North America, the Mississippi allowed settlers to move deep inland while staying connected to the coast. But in Brazil, traveling upriver from the coast meant fighting against the current for months. It was exhausting, dangerous, and economically pointless. Even worse, Brazil's interior sits on a high plateau, the Brazilian highlands rising sharply from the coastal plain. This creates dramatic escarpments, cliffs that early settlers called the Serra do Mar, the Sea Range. These mountains acted like a wall, blocking easy movement inland. Roads were impossible to build with 18th century technology. Mules struggled on steep jungle paths. Carts couldn't navigate the terrain. So goods stayed on the coast, and so did people. Even today, this geography matters. Brazil's major highways still hug the coast. The few roads that cut inland, like the Trans-Amazonian Highway, are notorious for being poorly maintained, dangerous and impassable during rainy seasons. The interior remains disconnected not by choice, but by the sheer difficulty of building infrastructure across such hostile terrain. Geography didn't just shape where Brazilians lived. It imprisoned them on the coast. But Brazil didn't always accept this fate. In the 1950s, the government made a radical decision: build a new capital in the middle of nowhere. Brasilia was born from a dream to finally turn Brazil's gaze inward. President Juscelino Kubitschek wanted to break the coastal curse. In 1956, he announced that Brazil would build an entirely new capital city 1,000 kilometers from the ocean, right in the heart of the Cerrado. Critics called it madness. The location was empty scrubland. No infrastructure, no water supply, no population, but Kubitschek was determined. He hired visionary architect Oscar Niemeyer and urban planner Lucio Costa to design a city from scratch. In just 4 years, an almost impossible timeline, Brasilia rose from the red dust. It was inaugurated in 1960, a modernist masterpiece shaped like an airplane when viewed from above. The government offices, Congress, and Supreme Court all moved inland. The message was clear: Brazil's future was in the interior. But the dream only partially succeeded. Brasilia grew into a city of 3 million people, proving that settlement in the interior was possible. Yet it remained an island of development surrounded by emptiness. The expected wave of migration never fully materialized. People moved to Brasilia because the government was there, not because the land itself offered opportunity. The city became a symbol of isolation rather than integration. Even today, Brasilia feels disconnected from the rest of Brazil. It's a planned city where everything works until you leave its borders and find yourself in the vast, underdeveloped Cerrado once again. Kubitschek's gamble showed that political will could challenge geography. But it also revealed that moving a capital doesn't automatically move a nation. While Brasilia aimed to populate the interior, another force was already transforming it: agribusiness. In the 1970s, Brazilian scientists made a breakthrough. They discovered that the Cerrado's acidic soil could be fixed with lime and phosphorus. Suddenly, the useless savanna became farmable. This was a revolution. Brazil began cultivating soybeans, corn, and cotton on an industrial scale. The Cerrado, once seen as a wasteland, became one of the most productive agricultural regions on Earth. Today, it supplies a significant portion of the world's soy, much of it exported to China to feed livestock. Enormous fazendas, farms the size of small countries spread across the interior. But here's the paradox. Agribusiness didn't bring people. It brought machines. Modern industrial farming requires very few workers. A single person operating a combine harvester can manage thousands of hectares. Towns did emerge places like Sinop, Lucas do Rio Verde, and Sorriso and Mato Grosso, but they're small, wealthy, and isolated. They exist to service the farms, not to build a vibrant inland society. Drive through the Cerrado today, and you'll see endless fields of soybeans stretching to the horizon. But you won't see many people. The interior is producing more than ever, yet it remains fundamentally empty. The economic model is extractive, just like it was in colonial times. Raw materials flow out toward ports, profits concentrate in coastal cities, and the interior stays hollow. Agribusiness proved that the land could be tamed, but it didn't prove that it could be populated. The Cerrado is wealthy but lonely, a landscape of productivity without community, feeding the world while remaining one of the least dense regions in Brazil. Then there's the Amazon, the northern heart of Brazil and the most extreme case of emptiness. The Amazon basin covers 60% of Brazil's territory, but holds less than 10% of its population. Most of those people live in two cities, Manaus and Belém, both situated on rivers with access to the Atlantic. The rest is forest, river, and silence. Governments have tried to settle the Amazon for decades. In the 1970s, the military dictatorship launched an ambitious plan, the Trans-Amazonian Highway, a 4,000-kilometer road cutting straight through the rainforest. The goal was to open the Amazon to settlement, to bring landless farmers from the poor northeast and give them plots in the jungle. It was a disaster. The highway was never fully paved. During the rainy season, it became a river of mud. Settlers arrived to find that the jungle soil was terrible for farming. Without the forest canopy, the thin topsoil washed away in months. Malaria, yellow fever, and leishmaniasis ravaged communities. Most settlers abandoned their plots and returned to the coast or moved to shantytowns around Manaus. The forest reclaimed the clearings. Today, large sections of the Trans-Amazonian Highway are barely passable. The Amazon resisted settlement not because of lack of effort, but because it's fundamentally unsuited for traditional agriculture and urban life. The indigenous peoples who have lived there for millennia understood this. They adapted to the forest, living in small mobile communities that worked with the ecosystem rather than against it. But modern Brazil's model of development, large-scale farming, cities, roads, simply doesn't work in the Amazon. The jungle remains a barrier, not a frontier. So we return to the question, why is Brazil's heart still empty? The answer is layered. It starts with geography, poor soil, extreme climates, rivers that flow the wrong way, mountains that block access. But geography alone doesn't explain it. Plenty of difficult environments have been settled throughout history. The real answer is historical inertia. Brazil was built as a coastal empire, and that structure became locked in. Every investment, every road, every port reinforced the coastal pattern. When railroads came to Brazil in the 1800s, they connected coastal cities to each other and to inland mines, but they didn't open the deep interior. When industrialization arrived in the 1900s, factories were built in São Paulo and Rio, where workers and ports already existed. The coast had a 400-year head start, and the interior never caught up. Even today, economic incentives push people toward the coast. Jobs, universities, hospitals, culture, everything that makes modern life desirable is concentrated in coastal cities. The interior offers land, but land alone isn't enough. You need infrastructure, community, opportunity. Brasilia showed that government intervention can create cities. But it takes more than political will to shift an entire nation's center of gravity. There's also a psychological dimension. Brazilians see the interior as the frontier, a place of opportunity for some, but also a place of isolation and hardship. The coast represents modernity, connection to the world, civilization. The interior represents the unknown. This mental map is as powerful as any physical geography. It shapes where people choose to live, where businesses invest, and where the government focuses its attention. But the story isn't over. Brazil's empty heart is beginning to fill slowly, unevenly, but undeniably. The 21st century is bringing new forces that could finally change the pattern. Climate change is making coastal cities more vulnerable. Rising sea levels threaten Rio and Santos. Droughts and extreme weather are pushing some to reconsider the interior. Meanwhile, technology is reducing the isolation. High-speed internet reaches even remote fazendas now. Remote work makes living in the interior more viable. Brazil's agricultural frontier continues to push north and west, bringing roads, electricity, and towns. There's talk of building a new railway, the Ferrogrão, that would connect the soybean-producing regions of Mato Grosso directly to ports on the Amazon River, bypassing the coastal bottleneck entirely. If built, it could reshape Brazil's economic geography. But this growth comes with enormous costs. The expansion into the Cerrado and Amazon is causing deforestation at catastrophic rates. The Cerrado has already lost half its original vegetation, faster destruction than the Amazon itself. Indigenous lands are under constant pressure. The question isn't just whether Brazil's interior will be populated, but how. Will it be sustainable, inclusive development that respects the environment and the people who already live there? Or will it be another wave of extraction, enriching a few while leaving the land scarred and the interior still fundamentally hollow? Brazil stands at a crossroads. For 500 years, it clung to the coast. Now it's being forced to finally confront its interior, not as an afterthought, but as the key to its future. Brazil's empty heart is a paradox. A nation of continental scale, blessed with resources, yet unable to populate its own core. But perhaps that emptiness isn't entirely a problem. Perhaps it's also an asset. In a world running out of wilderness, Brazil's vast interior represents one of the last great reservoirs of biodiversity, fresh water, and carbon storage. The Cerrado and Amazon aren't just empty, they're alive. They regulate rainfall across South America. They store billions of tons of carbon. They host species found nowhere else on Earth. If Brazil had followed the path of the United States, filling its interior with cities and farms, the global climate would be in even worse shape. So the question becomes, what should Brazil do with its heart? Should it finally complete the colonial project and populate every corner? Or should it embrace a different vision, one where emptiness is protected, where indigenous peoples are empowered, where the interior serves as the lungs of the continent rather than its frontier? There's no easy answer. Brazil needs development. Millions still live in poverty. The interior holds economic potential that could lift the nation. But that development must be different from the past. It must be regenerative, not extractive. It must respect the land, not dominate it. Brazil's empty heart is a mirror. It reflects the choices the nation makes about growth, about sustainability, about what kind of country it wants to be. The lights may still be sparse when you look at Brazil from space. But in that darkness, there's possibility. The future of Brazil won't be written on the coast. It will be written in the spaces between the lights.